In our last update, we wanted to see higher prices on Bitcoin, but ideally, we wanted to see that support retested to then see a reversal to the upside. However, if we lost that support, what I wanted to see was a job to take out the range lows at $109,000. And in the end, what ended up happening is that we dropped into our support, which was my ideal scenario, and it was this one if you remember, okay? So we dropped into my support, we got a small reaction, but then continued lower, took out the previous daily lows, and unfortunately price decided to stop there before getting another reversal to the upside. So with that said, as usual, before I dive into today's price action, let me recap what I personally did. So this time, as I wanted to see the drop into support, and price was hovering above it on the New York Open, plus we had this imbalance which was not in its place in my opinion, I decided to open a short position, just take it down to my support area, and then see if I would flip long or just hold that position for much lower prices. And then of course what happened is that, as mentioned, I shorted because my support got front run. We got the drop just a couple of minutes later, we reached my support, and even though we got a decent reaction, which was this one, I personally did not love the wick. And when I saw that, what I decided to do is implement a stop loss for my short position, which was this one, entry price around $112,700. So I just put a stop loss at entry and called it a day here. And that was the right decision because price continued lower, and then we ended up taking out the daily lows. But when I saw the small consolidation, I did decide to fully close one of my short position. However, I did want to hold the second one, which was this one. I wanted to hold it, as just mentioned, to take out the range lows at $109,000. But unfortunately, the next day, price just decided to reverse higher, and I got stopped out my second short position at entry. Okay. And at this point, of course, it made sense to expect to move towards $115,000, but of course, I didn't see any trade because longing up here simply was not the best risk reward ratio. But if you go over to the charts, of course, we got that continuation higher and we are moving towards our resistance area at $115,000. So with that said, that was a very decent short position. I would have loved to take it lower and potentially see this as outlined in our last update. This didn't happen, but very quickly what ended up happening, it is important for you to understand. We had a partially filled 30-minute imbalance, and this is what ended up offering support. Of course, I didn't expect this, but you can see how powerful these candles are. The way I saw it is that we had lost the point of control, which was above here. So we dropped below the point of control, and on top of that, we had also lost the anchored VWAP, which was right there. So we had kind of lost it. But again, you can see we lost two big supports, but the imbalance ended up offering the lows. And that's how powerful these candles are. But again, in any case, you understand what happened on this low. I didn't expect it, but still a nice short position and nice profits taken home. But with that out of the way, what can you expect next? Well, personally, I would still like that resistance to get reached, which is still above us, as you can see. So what I would do is go on the daily. We don't have an imbalance. On the 12-hour, we do have an imbalance on this breakout. So all I would do is take the midpoint of this candle, which comes in at $113,100. So I would mark out this level. And if you go on the 4-hour, you can see that we have pretty much the same midpoint. If I show you, it comes in at $113,050. Okay, so just around the midpoint of that 12-hour imbalance. However, as you can see, in my view, this midpoint already got tested. Even though it didn't get tested to the dollar, this is still a very nice midpoint retest of the 4-hour to continue higher. So with that said, even though this is an interesting level, and what you can simply do is take this low, okay, because it does come around the midpoint. But as I said, as the 4-hour already got retested, this is not the best support to look for in my opinion. But in any case, how am I looking to play around this? Well, ideally, what we get today, what I'm expecting would be a further drop. I do believe that we need a bit of correction, but I think it would make sense to get maybe something like this, but hold a higher low and then continue higher into our resistance. Of course, if we get this and then move into it with a lot of imbalances and we get a reaction, then personally, I will be interested in opening a short position at the highs to potentially see that reversal to the downside. But what we could get is that even though the midpoint did get retested, we could definitely see something like this, which would be that drop, take out that low, and then reverse to the upside. And at this point, the scenario would still be the same. If we get a reaction at that resistance, then again, look for short positions for that reversal lower. But of course, finally, if we simply move up from here, so you do something like this, then of course, the resistance remains the same. And if you get a reaction, you can look for the drops lower. So finally, if we break above that resistance, in my view, that would be a big sign of strength. And what I would expect next is for this area above to get revisited, which will be the fill of this 4-hour imbalance at around $121,000. Okay, so if you break $115,000, I do believe that we will have another pretty much 4.5% tries to come after that. Okay, and that's why this level is so important, because once again, if you break it, expect much higher prices. However, if you move into it and you get the rejection, then we could get a very nice drop to the downside. So with that said, that was mainly it for this update. A quick recap to the downside. We have one level to be aware of. I wouldn't really consider this one as a support, but more as a reference point. Of course, if we do drop into it and we get a reaction, then I will open a long position. However, if you drop and you lose it, that would be a massive sign of weakness. And at this point, I would expect much lower prices to take out all of these lows. Okay. However, what I'm personally expecting would be to hold this low. So maybe put in a higher low, jump into it, get that reversal higher. And then once again, we can see what happens at this resistance. Do we get rejection or do we break it and continue much higher? So with all of that said, as usual, if you guys enjoyed this update, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.